ignorant is to be ignorant of what we have going on in this country. It is absolutely ignorance that would make someone say that it doesn't exist. And so once you get past the point of saying that it doesn't exist and you realize that it does, then what do you do about it? So when it comes to employment, that's why we have non-discrimination acts. That's why we have Equal Opportunity Act, whatever, in this country to protect people from it. And actually, Republicans and some right-wing people are trying to, all Caucasian, by the way, are trying to overturn the Equal Opportunity Act of all things. And they're also trying to overturn the, what was the other one? I can't remember. What was the other one? I can't remember. But they did overturn the Voting Rights Act, a portion of it, because they said we no longer have a need for this in America because we have a half black president and we no longer have discrimination. Don't you think that the fact or the idea of whether or not we have discrimination in this country should come from minorities and not from the majority rule? Don't you think that the people who actually experience being oppressed, the people who actually experience the sting of discrimination are the ones that should determine when we feel it is no longer an issue in America, not the rest of America? So that's that. All right, so the next thing I'm going to play you, it's a really short clip too. It's a really interesting story, very good. I want you to listen to it. We're going to talk about the social aspect of racism, the social aspect of racial inequality or inequity in America. We're going to talk about that next. And it's very, very interesting what this woman says. If you listen to her, it's only like 3 minutes long. She's talking about... well, you'll see what she's talking about, but I want you to listen carefully what she's saying, because I myself, being that I'm biracial, my mother is German, my father is African. My mother is German descent, my father's African descent. And so because of that, I really do understand both sides of the coin. I've been perceived as white in my lifetime. I've been perceived as black in my lifetime. I've been perceived as Hispanic. I've been perceived as Asian even. I've been perceived as everything, I think, under the fucking sun. I've been perceived at one point in my life, depending on how I looked at that point in my lifetime. So I do understand what it means and what it feels like to be most races, because I've been perceived by that by most people. So listen to how white privilege, which is what we're talking about next, really does actually help, can be helpful to people who don't have that in America. So here we go. Listen to this.
Grew up together. My sister-in-law, who's half black, half white, but looks white, blue eyes, whiter than most white folks, very white. She and I, we kind of grew up together. We raised our children together. So they're first cousins, and it's a wonderful, very, very multicultural family. So we're going in a Safeway one day, and Kathleen, my sister-in-law, is in front of me. And she's, writing a check for her groceries. Now, my daughter, who at the time was 10 years old, was standing with me, and I was directly behind her, getting ready to get my groceries. So Kathleen comes up, and the checker, who is a strawberry blonde, freckled, very delightful, warm, the checker, this young woman, is talking to Kathleen. Hey, how you doing? Isn't it a nice day today? They're just chatting up. And says, yeah. So Kathy writes her check, and she steps off to the side with her groceries because she's waiting for me. Of course, again, Kathleen looks white, right? So I come up. No conversation. She looks up at me. Absolutely no, just a little chatter. And I write my check. My daughter, however, is 10, notices immediately the difference in how she responds to me. So I write my check, and she goes, I'm going to need 2 pieces of ID. At which point, my daughter looks at me, and she gets very, very embarrassed, and tears are kind of coming up in her eye, like, Mommy, you're not gonna let her do this. Why is she doing this to us, right? So I'm trying to figure out what I should do, because behind me are 2 elderly white women, right? And I'm thinking, okay, so then I become the angry black woman, right? And they're gonna be, and I'm just trying to second guess all the drama. So then I just give her the 2 pieces of ID. I said, some things you got to choose your battles, right? And then it gets worse. She pulls out the bad check book, right? So this is the book that shows the people who have written bad checks. So she starts searching for my license in the bad checks, at which point it's just out of control now. Just as I'm standing there trying to decide what to do, and it's really deeply humiliating. Now my daughter is in full-blown emotionally upset, who's 10. My sister-in-law walks back over. And she steps in and she says, "Excuse me, why are you doing this?" And the checker goes, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "Why are you taking her through all of these changes? Why are you doing that?" She goes, "Well, this is our policy." She goes, "No, it's not your policy because you didn't do that with me." "Oh, well, I know you've been." She goes, No, she's been here for years. I've only lived here for 3 months." And so at this point, the 2 white elderly ladies go, "Oh, I can't believe what this checker has done with this woman. It is totally unacceptable." At which point the manager walks over. So the manager walks over and says, "Is there a problem here?" And then my sister-in-law again responds. She goes, "Yes, there is a problem here. Here is what happened." So you see, she used her white privilege. And even though Kathleen is half black and half white, she recognizes what that means. And she made the statement. She pointed out the injustice. And she, as a result of that one act, influenced everyone in that space. But what would have happened? I can't know for certain had the black woman said, "This is unfair. Why are you doing this to me?" Would it have had the same impact? But Kathleen knew that she walked through the world differently than I did. And she used her white privilege to educate and make right a situation.
Testing. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Anyway, so you see this example of this woman who is perceived as being Caucasian, although she's half black and half white. And her sister comes up right behind her. Her sister's treated one way and she's treated another. And the woman had no idea they were related, thought they were complete strangers, I guess, or whatever. Even if she did know they were related, she didn't think they were the same. And she treated them quite differently. So this just illustrates that there obviously are people, that are treated differently just because of their race. I mean, I think everybody, whatever race you are, if you're a minority race in this country, then you understand what it means to be shopping while black or shopping while Mexican or shopping whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? And so people follow you around because you look a certain way, whether you're dressed in a fucking suit or you're dressed in low hung jeans off your fucking ass. Whatever the case is, it doesn't matter. If you have a certain color of skin, they will follow you around and perceive you as being different and being untrustworthy. So it is obvious in social situations and circles that it is obvious that there is racial inequity there as well. And I think, a lot of people forget that, and that's the other thing I want to say, is that people are often like, well, what is the big deal? Race, and talking about race, not whatever. Like it's not supposed to be talked about, or we shouldn't discuss it. Well, the reality is that if it's not discussed, it will never change. Not talking about race would mean that we're accepting it as okay, that the racial bias in this country is acceptable to the rest of us, and it's not acceptable. And to not discuss it and not to say that it exists is not only ignorant, but it's also to say that I am okay with it, and I'm not okay with it, and most people are not okay with it, whether you're white or black or whatever race you are. And there are plenty of Caucasian people in this country, in this world, who are not racist at all and have no racial bias really in their makeup. And there are plenty who do. There are plenty of racists who are black. There are plenty of racists who are Mexican. There are plenty of racists who are Asian. The racists come in every color, shape, size. It's not just white people against black people, but this just illustrates the most disparity, I think, between the races, because when it comes to black people and white people, in terms of income, in terms of equality and in employment, and also in social circles, it is something that is a drawback. And also I read a story that there was a black fraternity on a campus where it's predominantly Caucasian, and on that campus they actually were. It was during rush week or whatever, and so a lot of the white guys and the fraternities on the same block would actually come together and congregate outside of their fraternity house, and they would be talking in morality or whatever. Nothing happened. Nobody came by, nothing. However, when it was a group of black men, 15 black men or so, who were congregating outside the front of their fraternity house, the cops came down. The cops came down and stood there and watched them. Okay? And just stood there, didn't say anything to them, just stood there and watched them. And whenever they would come out, that's what they would do. But whenever it was the white kids, they didn't do shit. So, I mean, how many more ways do I have to illustrate that there is obviously racial inequity in this country? Come on, people, come on. Oh, that's funny. Funny. That's funny. Funny guy. Anyway, so last thing I want to say, and last point to illustrate, is the justice system here in the country. And I wanted to talk about that and express to you why there is racial inequality in the justice system. And if I can find the one last clip I'm going to play, and then we can move on to that, we'll be done. Where is the cracking there? Is that it right there? Crap. I don't know if this is it or not. Let me see. I've got all these clips on here, and I'm trying to find. Oh, here it is. This is it. Okay, so listen to this. It's a 2-minute clip, and then we'll talk about racial inequality in the justice system. Be right back.
War on drugs routinely targets people of color, often living in ghetto areas, for stops and searches, typically in a futile effort to find drugs. The problem that we face as civil rights lawyers and advocates is that it's extremely difficult to prove race discrimination because the Supreme Court, has required that you offer evidence of conscious racial bias, some kind of admission, in order to even get in the courthouse door. So that's why we don't see so many cases involving, racial bias in the criminal justice system. The single most important thing we can do to eliminate racial bias in the criminal justice system today is to end the war on drugs. The drug war is responsible for the arrest, incarceration, and branding of millions of people of color as felons, relegating them to a permanent second-class status for life. Drug use, abuse, as well as drug dealing is just as prevalent in white communities as it is in poor communities of color. But the drug war has been waged almost exclusively in ghetto communities, resulting in what I believe is a racial undercast. An enormous population of black and brown folks who are poor, who've been labeled felons for engaging in precisely the same kind of behavior, illegal drug activity.
Hello. Okay, hello. There we go. I'm back again. Sorry. So as you can see, it's very true that there's inequality when it comes to the justice system. She was saying that there are communities that are targeted, and that the drug war is just as prevalent in the Caucasian or white, quote unquote, white communities as it is in the poorer communities, or even the black communities or Hispanic communities. Yet it is the black and Hispanic communities that are targeted primarily or by law enforcement. And I'm sure that, just as she said, but I'm sure that that is something that is prevalent all over the country. It is obvious that race is an issue. So I want to talk about the justice system real quick, tell you the 10 facts pertaining to the criminal justice system that impact on communities of color, and then we're going to wrap it up. So here we go. Unless somebody wants to call in, for God's sakes. That's why I'm having this fucking show this way. Anyway, so first of all, while people of color make up 30% of the United States population, they account for